Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to our class technologies discussion with Los Lunas Schools, which is a premier school district in the state of New Mexico. Today's focus will be on the district approach to online and blended learning. And I am so pleased to welcome Susan Chavez, the Assistant Superintendent of Special Services, Mary McGowan, the Director of Special Education, and Bill Hayes, the brand new Director of Educational Technology. Thank you all so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I just wanted to start out by setting the stage and painting a picture of the school district. So can you tell us a little bit about Los Lunas, maybe your location, your schools, your students?
I'll go ahead and jump in. So we are in central New Mexico. We are located about 20 miles south of Albuquerque. We probably would have become a suburb of Albuquerque at this point, but we are bordered by a Pueblo reservation. So it's right in between Albuquerque and Los Lunas. So it's a pretty quick drive we're considered part of the metro still at this point. We have about, in the whole area that Los Lunas School serves, I would say there's about 50 to 60,000 people. That's inclusive of the communities of Los Lunas, Bosque Farms, Valencia, Peralta, and Tomé, and also Highland Meadows and Meadow Lake and El Cerro. So we're very widespread east to west corridor. We go to the foothills of the Manzano Mountains, and from there we go about 50 miles west to another reservation, Pueblo Reservation, is Laguna. So we're very spread east to west. North to south, not so much. That's a much shorter mileage span. So we're probably maybe 20 miles north to south. We have 15 schools in our district. 3 of those are our high schools, 2 comprehensive and 1 opportunity high school, 2 middle schools, and 10 elementary schools. We have a sort of natural boundary in our district of our east side and our west side schools. We have the Rio Grande that flows right through the middle of our school district. So that somewhat separates, the Valencia High School student. Well, it doesn't separate, but it does have that natural boundary of students who go to Valencia High School and students go to Los Lunas High School, with the exception of one school, Parish Elementary, where Mary was the principal for many years and part of the school community for many years. The students at Parish, they do come to Los Lunas Middle School and then Los Lunas High School. So that we do serve about 8,500 students during a non-pandemic year. Our enrollment did drop this year. We went to about 8,100 students. So we're hoping to recoup and really re-enroll those students that we lost because of the pandemic. We have about 1,300 employees. We employ our own bus drivers all the way up to our administrators. So we really like to keep our employees here. And many of our employees grew up in our community, and they are graduates of one of our high schools in Valencia County.
Thank you. That was a very comprehensive overview, and it really helps paint a picture. So I know, and you mentioned the pandemic, but I know that over the course of the past year, that blended learning has been a big focus for your district. And not only over the past year, but really moving forward. So wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what the blended and remote options are going to look like in the district. And then I have a couple of follow-up questions as well.
So just going forward, it looks like we're going to be developing an online academy, digital academy for students that choose to do that. And then we're also going to have a in-school, regular class. As far as the blended instruction, it being students or teachers being zoomed in with students also at home. I don't think that that's currently going to be an option, but rather we're going to stick with the digital academy if students choose to do that.
So Kim, I'd like to share a little bit of backgrounds of how we got here.
Yeah, we'd love that.
So about 6 years ago, 3 elementary schools in our district applied for and received the Apple Connect Ed grant. I was one of the principals that applied at the school Susan mentioned, Parish Elementary. We were 3 schools out of 114 in the entire nation to receive this grant. And through this, each teacher received a MacBook and an iPad, and every student received an iPad. Along with that came ongoing training, side-by-side coaching. And so we started that about 6 years ago. And then those kiddos were starting to go to middle school, and we're like, oh gosh, here we supported them with all this technology and training. Now what do we do? So then we quickly switched and provided each of our middle school students with an iPad. Then thinking about our I'm giving a real Reader's Digest version, but then thinking about our high school kids and what they needed to do, and we got a great opportunity to do so. We provided every high school with a MacBook Air, and with the opportunity to do a buyout once they graduated from high school. So when the pandemic hit, we were pretty set with 3 elementary schools and all of our secondary schools. Our goal was to slowly morph into a complete one-to-one district by the year 2024. Okay. And then COVID hit. But fortunately, we had enough resources in place that we could quickly pivot and provide every single one of our students with a device, and every single one of our teachers and our educational assistants, so that the remote learning happened much more in a much better fashion than a lot of other districts. So we were truly blessed with that opportunity.
Absolutely. That's such a great point, that you kind of hit the ground running. And so how did everyone take that kind of pivot to remote learning? And was there an ease in transition? Was it harder for some students than others? How did that all go?
It was harder for some students than others, and it was also harder for some teachers than others. Mm-hmm. So think about a very traditional brick and mortar setting. Students are in front of you. And yet we are so incredibly proud of how well our teachers did. And Bill, who just came out of being a principal, was really, on the ground with teachers and in classrooms seeing that. And so, Bill, if you want to speak to that a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It was amazing just to see, a lot of people were afraid. They didn't really understand what that was going to look like. They didn't think they'd be able to teach remote, things like that. But we really just kind of hit the ground running. As soon as the schools were shut down, we continued construction. And then, it went great. I think teachers adjusted their instructional time and things that they needed to do. And went great, I think.
And for many of our students, it was very successful. For many of our students, it was very successful because this format had less distractions and they were able to focus more. And also with some of our therapies, some of our speech pathologists had great success with their students because it was seriously a one-on-one setting, and they could really, really develop their skills.
And I believe one of our key to successes that we did have transitioning from, we were actually on spring break when the pandemic hit. So we said goodbye to our students on March 6th, thinking that we would all come back on March 16th and we would, have a great spring break. Mm-hmm. We were ready to start the last 9 weeks of the school year. And on that Thursday during spring break, we were told that we would be shut down for 3 weeks. So we were really ready to prepare for 3 weeks. And then April 6th came, and that was our magic date. We didn't know that actually we wouldn't start until April 6th, 2021. So as coincidentally as it was, that's when we did return. We were told April 6th initially during that 3-week shutdown, but we returned on April 6th, 2021. One of those key to successes I believe we had prior to all the COVID and prior to everything that happened, we put a great emphasis on training our teachers on how to use their devices. So it wasn't enough just to put the devices in our teachers' hands. We had to train them on how to implement those devices and how to really understand how to use those devices. So we made a great effort to invest in Apple Professional Learning, and they were coaches. They were spending many days at Los Lunas Middle School, Valencia Middle School, Los Lunas High School, Valencia High School. And we had also spent the year of COVID, the year right up until COVID happened, training our 5th and 6th grade teachers. So in addition to those 3 elementary schools that had that immense training, all of our elementary schools, 5th and 6th grade teachers they had some more training, and each school has a site ed tech coordinator. So we built a structure and a system that our teachers could seek out support, and they did have the Apple training to really fall back on. And some were saying, oh, I probably should have paid attention a little bit more, while others were saying, yay, I'm ready for this. This is an easy transition. And during that process, we were also very blessed to partner with Apple in addition to Facebook. Facebook actually reached out to us immediately once we knew that we were in for the long haul, and they asked us what we needed. And we said, can you please buy us a district Zoom license? That's what we really need right now, because your company was so generous during the initial phases of COVID. You gave us all this access and didn't ask anything from us. And so we are so grateful for everything that you provided, because we would not have been able to connect like we did without your generosity. And Facebook continued that. We got a district license in May, and the rest is history.
Wow. That is amazing. And I think the foresight and just the training and technology that you already had really gave you a leg up, and kudos to you for seeing that and doing that. And kind of on that note, I wanted to shift to look into the future. And Bill, you mentioned that you'll continue with a remote learning option for some students. And why is that important to continue that option for a certain population of students?
Well, I think it's important because there were a lot of students that were successful in this environment, and they enjoyed it. And we're here to serve the public and what they need and what's best for kids. And for some kids, this is the best option for them.
Absolutely. And on that note too, what are the students that you are all seeing thriving in this online environment, and what benefits does that virtual learning bring to those students? At
the school side, it was a variety of students. It wasn't just a particular population, across the board, whether it be regular ed, special ed. There were students in every facet of that were successful. And I don't know if maybe it's, like Mary had said, less distractions, not as much things going around, around them, things like that. But yeah, it's a little bit of everything in everyone.
Well, and I had a conversation with a student yesterday who said, you know what, I stayed remote because I really don't like other kids, and I just really want to focus on my work. And you think about like a traditional high school. You have your jocks, you have your geeks, you have your popular girls, not so popular. This affords an opportunity for students to really own their learning and become individualized with it, and not have to fall into a mold, but really create their own space and their own learning environment. Absolutely. Well, and as much as crazy as the pandemic was, a lot of great things came out of it. So we're in the special education department. We have to hold lots and lots of meetings. And we found this venue to be so incredibly helpful for our families who, either are at work or at struggling or at home teaching 7 kids. And this has become a much more efficient way for us to meet and have gatherings.
Absolutely. And how, you mentioned the parents and family meetings. How else has this blended and virtual learning and just even connections impacted student access and opportunities?
So I think one huge opportunity for our students is that the world is now at their fingertips. I think we've been able to demonstrate to our teachers that, yes, they can go see the Louvre via a virtual field trip. Yes, they can go on a safari, where our students may not have had that opportunity prior. I grew up in the era of World Book encyclopedias, and my big excitement was looking at the human body with the overlays. And, that's how I learned in Carmen, San Diego. But if I had had that opportunity to really have these virtual field trips, I would have said, wow, that's where, I want to go there someday, or wow, I can experience that and be in a conversation with somebody from across the world. And I think that gave our teachers an insightful perspective that their learning doesn't always have to be in that textbook, and we don't have to teach cover to cover. There's a lot of opportunities out there, and we need to make it more relevant for our students. I think one thing that many students and many teachers are going to probably miss, but it probably won't ever happen again, are snow days. But in those snow days, we can go remote, but we can also make it more relevant. Hey, go outside and have a snowball fight and measure your trajectory of your snowball and measure your circumference of the snowball. Come back in and do a clips video or a portfolio about it. So I think one really positive aspect is that we've been able to make this more relevant for their learning, because they weren't in the classroom anymore and they had to make it relevant to what they had in their home.
Another positive that I saw was interventions pieces were easier to get students, because a lot of time, it's movement and trying to get a group of individuals in one place. So we were able to create, interventions based off of CFA data. We had ELL interventions, we have SAT interventions. So we were able to really work with those students and get them together in a much easier way.
Breakout rooms were also incredible. So in speaking with my 86-year-old uncle, who's still a professor in New York, he found that with 160 students in his class, put them into breakout rooms, they had much more viable conversations than being in a huge lecture room. And then, like with a first grade teacher here, if somebody's being naughty or manipulating the conversation, she put the child into a breakout room, went into the breakout room and said, hey, are you ready to start paying attention now? Are you ready to start being a team member? And then they could bring them back. So, I mean, it just really gave us a reset button.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Any other tools or techniques that you've been utilizing and want to share?
We did start using Nearpod, I think in February. Many teachers had access to the free license that was available for them. We met with many teachers and they kept asking, and some were already buying their own teacher license. So the district did purchase through Facebook as well. Facebook was really generous again. They did pay for our district license. So I think that also opened up a new avenue for our teachers and our students, much more engagement. I think initially the end of last school year, it was, hey, make connections, make sure your kids are okay, make sure that they're logging in. We went through 3/4 of the year. I don't know that academics were, the priority at that point. It was making sure that everybody is okay, because this was so new. We were also isolated as we went into August and still not knowing what would happen month to month, and then realizing we wouldn't come back until spring break. We really said that engagement needs to increase, because we saw a lot of students turning their videos off and they weren't participating. So that was something that we really needed to focus in on.
Yeah, absolutely. And piggybacking on the engagement piece, what were your policies for video? What do you see works best to really keep students engaged?
Well, obviously, keeping video on is the best way. But as Susan explained earlier, we're so spread out geographically that we had a lot of connectivity issues. We did purchase hotspots for students and families. But if you have 5 or 6 kids in one house, or a mom, or and people are all using the same Wi-Fi, we found that turning the video off helped to maintain the connectivity. And so teachers got really creative with it, but unfortunately we did have some who just never turned on their video. They would log in, but just would never turn on their video.
So we didn't really have a policy per se, because we did discuss it. There was really colorful conversations revolving around that and what was the right thing to do, but it always circled back to connectivity. If the video was taking up more and they were getting cut out, at least they were on and they were listening.
So next question is on metrics. So it's great to have your perspective, all three of your perspective from a district level, but then also as former school practitioners. So as you're kind of wrapping up this school year, you're starting to plan for next school year, what metrics have you been paying attention to, and what metrics will you be paying attention to measure success, especially in this online format?
So our traditional metrics were really thrown out the window this year. We did give benchmark assessments three different times, middle of the year, beginning, middle, and end. We just received some of those scores this week, and they're hard to look at because we really don't know. We have some students who are proficient their first semester of kindergarten and they know how to read, and they probably could read at the 9th grade level. So obviously,
Thanks, Mom. Thanks, Mom.
or they're Doogie Howser, and we really need to accelerate their learning and really promote them. So, and then on the other hand, we have some students that are really struggling. So really looking at what we've traditionally looked at didn't work this year. I think some things that we are looking at are those attendance rates, how many students actually did participate. We're also looking at how many students logged in. So we can measure that via Zoom. You have all those metrics that you provide on your dashboard. We can see how many meetings our teachers provided. We can go back and look at Nearpod, how many lessons that we were able to deploy and activate. And as far as I know, Mary's met with Nearpod many times, and they discuss how quickly our teachers really started to participate and become more active users of Nearpod. And I think another metric that we are using that we really don't think about too often is how many referrals we made for our Counseling World, which is our partner for our mental health professionals. That's very near and dear to Mary's heart. It's to all of us, but Mary oversaw that whole program this year, and she was really connected with our mental health team. And we really need to keep an eye on our social emotional well-being for our staff and our students and their families. So those are some of the metrics that we've started to really look at. And I know Mary speaks with the counselors and social workers on a daily basis, even now during the summer. So those were some of the examples.
Great. And what kind of, just to kind of wrap things up, what advice would you give to schools and districts as they enter their own kind of next phase in online learning and start establishing some solid policies, procedures, and practices? And I would say, thinking about administrators, thinking about teachers, and even maybe students and families.
I would say to look at engagement strategies first. How are you going to engage students? What are you going to do with students that don't have the ability to turn on that camera? That's why, like Susan said, Nearpod was great, because now the kid that didn't have their camera on, didn't say anything in the chat, well, they're logged on in Nearpod and they're doing something on that end. So just because you can't see the student doesn't mean that they're not engaged. So I would really look at engagement strategies first and then go from there.
Also, there is no back to normal. We will never be where we were. And so, and it's especially hard for educators who have been at this for a while, just really embrace the breaking down of barriers, really embrace what is out there and what is possible, and really, I don't know, just grab it and go with it.
Absolutely.
And public school has forever changed because of the pandemic, and we needed to change. We're not those students. We're not the students that are in the classroom today. We were very different learners. Bill, a little bit more closer to being in high school than Mary and I, but we're not those same learners. We were in an era that no longer exists. We didn't have technology at our fingertips. Now they do, and I think teachers, because of the pandemic, it gave them an opportunity to not be so afraid to use technology. I think that was one thing that teachers were a little hesitant, not because they didn't want to, because they didn't know how to. And now that they know how to, I think it gives them more of a comfort level, understanding where the students are coming from. Those conversations of, well, they're going to go and look up really naughty things, have started to dissipate. They're still going to do it. They're kids, but we have to teach them digital citizenship, and we have to be prepared for those. But I think teachers are in a better understanding of, this is how they learn. This is how I had a great insight into their home. We were able, I think that was another really positive. We were able to connect to families and students in ways we never had before because of our ability. They let us in their homes. So I think really understanding that our public school has changed, and we've talked about this. We don't know what it's going to look like 10 years from now because of the pandemic. So really embracing that change.
Absolutely. Well, Susan, Mary, Bill, thank you all so much for joining us and for your insight and your candor. I'm really looking forward to following you over this next school year to see how everything goes. You're just really an exemplar example of how to roll things out, how to support students, and just really having a great attitude about all of these changes and serving all students. So congratulations on all of your progress, and best of luck in the future. And for more trends and tools in distance learning, blended learning, remote learning, visit us at class.com. And thank you all for joining us today.